New York Attorney General Letitia James and her office recently urged the New York State Supreme Court to force Donald Trump to pay. Now, this has led supporters, even critics of the former president, to say this is now becoming a little bit extreme. Some say that the amount that Trump has been fined was set on purpose so that James could have access or a chance to take most, if not all, of his properties in New York City, a move that will cost many people their jobs. Now, even though Trump is having a lot of trouble in New York, his Georgia case is looking better by the day. Many experts say that Judge Scott McAfee gave Trump and his legal team a huge win by deciding to remove either Nathan Wade or DA Fani Willis from the case.
He had to. There was no way that it was going to be the elected district attorney of Fulton County, Fani Willis, who was going to step down. After this decision came out.
On social media, former President Trump celebrated the decision, calling Wade a disgrace. In a letter to Willis, Wade wrote he was resigning in the interest of democracy and to move this case forward as quickly as possible.
Now, you may wonder how people can say that given that Fani Willis is still very much on the case. Well, experts say that it's only a matter of time until Fani Willis herself is removed. They warn of two ticking time bombs. So the first is the possibility that the Court of Appeals decides to hear an appeal on the matter and reverse McAfee. The second would be from the Prosecuting Attorney's Qualifications Commission of Georgia, a commission with the power to suspend or even remove Fani Willis altogether from the case. To make matters even worse for Fani Willis, they've already received a complaint against the prosecutor. Some say that it would be best for Willis to just take a leave of absence and allow a deputy chief from her office to manage the case. Many are skeptical of such a move since it looks like Willis is enjoying the fame that she's getting. Now, speaking of which, back in New York City, Attorney General Letitia James seems to also be enjoying what's happening with the former president. Now, before I really get into this, all I ask is that you guys take 1 second, drop a quick like for the video. I totally appreciate your support, you guys. And I want to thank you so much for sharing this video on Facebook and Twitter. It totally helps out the channel and definitely helps to get the truth out. So Donald Trump's legal team has exhausted all options to try and come up with the $464 million that he needs in order to file an appeal. They insist that it's practically impossible to get this amount of money within such a short period of time.
Former President Trump is having trouble securing $464 million in a bond that's been leveled against him in the civil fraud judgment against the former president and his sons. Today, Mr. Trump's attorneys told a New York appeals court that getting that bond is, quote, a practical impossibility. It's almost $500 million. Mr. Trump's legal team says they've reached out to 30 companies to back the bond. His lawyers are asking for a delay in enforcement of the judgment to give him more time. Mr. Trump either must find the cash or post bond in order to prevent state authorities from seizing his properties. The bond is currently due at the end of the month.
In fact, one of Letitia James' lawyers wrote in a filing that the court should deny Donald Trump's extraordinary request to appeal without posting the full amount. Now, I gotta emphasize that the banks where Trump got his loans, they did not file any charges against him. They made money off of Donald Trump. They made money on the interest, and all of the loans that were made, they were all paid back with interest. None of these banks or lending institutions were victims here, as they admit that they were all paid back. But still, a crime without a victim seems to be worth almost $500 million. Does this make any sense to anyone? So Dennis Fan, a senior assistant solicitor general for the state, he said that the former president's filing was procedurally improper. He further urged that this be rejected and for Trump to be forced to pay the entire amount, an idea that some supporters and even critics were wary of. Kevin O'Leary, a guy who's been very vocal recently about Donald Trump's legal battles in New York, he discussed the repercussions that this decision could have on New York State. So he says that this doesn't feel like a case about Trump anymore. He adds that we have the #1 economy because we have laws, we have due process, and we have property rights. The idea that someone like Letitia James could seize assets within 30 days on a bond number that's never even been seen before is just insane. He adds that this sends a very bad message to everyone here in the country and even international investors. And this is what some theorize, that this entire bond was just a smokescreen for Trump's businesses to be taken over and for him to go bankrupt.
What happens Monday? So technically, she can start attempting to seize all of his properties. That includes not only the real estate holdings, it includes arts and wages and anything that he essentially owns. If legally, she can attempt to go after assets that he owns in other states. That includes Mar-a-Lago. places in Florida, she has to go through the courts there. Just a couple fundamentals of this. So the reason why the bond is over $500 million is because you have to post 120% of your judgment. To your point about, when you bring up this cruel and unusual punishment, the 8th Amendment states excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. If there is anything that this 8th Amendment prohibits and tried to prescribe against, believe me, it is a $500 million of judgment for a working New York employer with 0 victims.
Even critics of Donald Trump have voiced their support given this incredibly unusual situation. Dallas Mavericks minority owner Mark Cuban, he recently defended the former president. Democratic Representative Ted Lieu, he used the hashtag Trump is broke on X after he called him out for allegedly lying about how much money he has. So Liu says that Trump says he's a billionaire but doesn't have $500 million. He concludes that Trump is a liar and that all he needs to do is to use math to prove the point. Now the problem is that even though you're considered a billionaire, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have $1 billion liquid in cash just sitting there in the bank, which is exactly what Mark Cuban contested to. He emphasized that net worth is completely different than cash in the bank. Mark Cuban says he doesn't support Trump, but that Ted was wrong in his assessment. You know things are bad when critics suddenly back you up. Now with Trump's many financial woes, it's only normal that President Biden would kind of jump right in and land a shot while he's down. That's kind of dirty. Speaking in a fundraiser in Dallas, the President Joe Biden talked about a defeated looking man who came to him for help. Biden said that this guy was in crushing debt and he was just completely wiped out. He then said, "Donald, I'm sorry, I can't help you," which of course is a jab at Donald Trump's enormous debt due to the multiple charges aimed at him. This is rather ironic for some, especially when you take into account that the president promised to get rid of all student loan debt. As it turns out, he couldn't help all of those people as well. He even went against the Supreme Court just so that he can say that he forgave some of them. But in a recent showing of just how far President Joe Biden has pushed back, the president has forgiven even more student loans. Plans have been revealed that around $5.8 billion in student loan debt will be forgiven for almost 80,000 public service workers. Now, some say that he's ramping things up because it's an election year, and it's one of the things that he promised to do. However, it also goes against the Supreme Court ruling that shot down his initial debt relief program. So it really kind of makes you wonder if there are things that he can do that he just kind of chooses not to do. I think we all know the answer to that. Much like closing the border through executive action. And since we're already talking about the topic, there's a very crucial new update in Texas. So the news is going by so fast with this one, and it's related to this SB4 law. It's the one where police they would be able to arrest and prosecute anybody that they think has entered the country illegally. So many feel like this is too much and that it's creating an anti-immigrant mindset. Others are arguing that illegal immigrants shouldn't be entering the country in the first place and that this legislation just makes sense. Just recently, a panel of 3 federal appeals court judges, they heard arguments about whether or not this should be upheld. Now, if you ask Texas Governor Greg Abbott, the law is something that Texas absolutely needs in order to protect their state and of course the rest of the United States. Now, if you ask the Biden administration, this is a law that's completely unnecessary and that we should instead welcome newcomers into the country by keeping our borders wide the heck open. Now, at this point, things are just kind of going back and forth, with the judges being seen as split regarding this idea. Many critics of the Biden administration are confused as to why he would want to encourage even more illegal immigrants into the country. There are those that believe that this entire plan has been to give them voting rights all along, a right that may be provided right before the 2024 presidential elections. But what do you guys think about all this? Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to continue to bring you guys the updates and keep you informed about what's really going on around us. All I ask is that you hit the like button for the video. Thank you so much for sharing this video on Facebook and Twitter, and I'll see you on the next one.